Hello squad. So this is our terrain model for our Operation Bobcat Lightning. And so when creating this terrain model, the very first thing we're going to look at is our grid scale. So as we can see along this side and this side, we have each of the individual grid lines labeled just so we can orient ourselves to the terrain and know where we are in this location. And then along with the grid scale, we also have our north-seeking arrow up here, just so we can, again, orient ourselves and know where we're at in this operation. So the next thing that we're going to look at when creating this terrain model is going to be creating the terrain itself. So as we can see, we have some hills, some valleys in this terrain model, and the important thing with terrain is to exaggerate these features. So we want to show mountains as being very steep, very tall, and then show valleys as being very, very deep, and yeah, so just exaggerate these terrain models so we get a better understanding of what we're going to see when we're actually conducting the operation. And then we can also show, along with this terrain, we can show our vegetation. So as you can see in the terrain model, we have some dirt, some sticks, kind of just showing that it's going to be, there is going to be some vegetation as we conduct this operation. So the next thing that we would include are going to be our roads and trails, and these are illustrated by the green 550 cord in this terrain model, and these are just important to include so we understand potential enemy avenues of approach or avenues that we can use when maneuvering in this location. So after we have the terrain, the grid scale, and our roads and trails, the next thing we're going to label is our important locations. For example, our ORP, our rally point, our objective, things of that nature, and then also the locations of each of our units. So that includes our security positions 1 and 2, and then also our support by fire position, which is close to the objective, just so each of our subordinate units know where they're supposed to be. And then along with those locations, we are going to include their tasks. So for security, we have interdicting. For support by fire, we have supporting by fire. And then for the assault, we're going to have them destroying the objective. And then, so once we have each of our units and placed on the terrain model, we're going to include their routes. And so these routes are shown by the red yarn and are labeled Route B, Route C, and Route A. And then we also have our DOAD to the objective. So these are important to include just so each unit knows like where they're going to be heading during this objective and how they get to each of their respective positions. So after we have our routes, we are going to include our decisive point, which is indicated by this purple star right here. This is going to be along the road for potential enemy reinforcements. So just to understand where we might have some potential enemy during this operation. Next, we are going to label our IDF targets that we have. So you can see we have 2 for this operation, one near the decisive point and then another linear target a little bit further on down the road. And after we have labeled our IDFs, we're going to label our TRPs. So for this operation, we have 3. We have 1, 2, and 3. And these TRPs are going to kind of inform where we create our phase lines and when we're going to be shifting and lifting fire throughout this operation. So then once we have our TRPs created and labeled, then we can go ahead and create our phase lines, which are indicated by this white piece of string up here. So we have our first one, phase line alpha, which is going to be along our release point. And then we have phase line F, phase line G, and phase line X. So these are all going to be throughout the operation. Phase line F and phase line G are going to be informing when our support by fire will be shifting and lifting fire. And then phase line X is going to be our LOA. So once the assault team reaches our LOA, that's going to be like the conclusion of our operations. And then finally we have phase line H, which is going to be our restricted fire line for our support by fire along their right limit of fire. And that kind of includes all the specific parts of our terrain model. Thank you.